Hi, I'm Johnny Engineer, the only banking systems engineer on the planet professing that subject. And if you Google for banking systems engineer, I come up. At the same time, I'm the only professor of poker systems engineering. I'm the best limit hold'em poker player in the world with the highest win rate ever. So I'm not only an expert in banking systems, but also in winning systems. In 1979, I got tired of being busted for gambling, so I ran for parliament to legalize victimless crime. Champion of the gamblers, hookers, and dope smokers, they called me. And at the time, people asked me about inflation and unemployment. And I thought about it, and I said, whoa, how come my casino chips retain their value, and the government's chips lose their value year after year? What's going on here? The hardware's identical. Must be something wrong with the software. So I took 40 days to do an engineering analysis and came up with the miracle equation, which explained that interest rates didn't fight inflation. Interest rates caused inflation. So you've seen recent popular videos, Money as Debt, Zeitgeist Addendum, and both of them use the derivation from my equation in their video. You'll note P over P plus I at a certain point. It explains that the amount of money in circulation is the principal, but the amount of debt or prices is principal plus interest, because that's what you have to give back to the banks. But they never printed the interest, which has interesting effects. The mortgage comes from the French Latin mort, meaning death, and gage, meaning gamble. And at the end of the game, someone always gets knocked out so the other guys can pay the interest. I will do the derivation quickly. 10 guys put up their watch as collateral, and they all borrowed 10 chips, or $10, or 10 credits, or 10 gallons of something. And they all have to promise to bring back 11 to the bank, the pump house. Now, there's 100 tokens of money in circulation, but the total debt is P plus I, principal plus interest, 100 plus 10. So, the amount of guys who can survive, P out of P plus I. 100 out of 110 can be paid. Now, the movies don't go the next step to determine what I over P plus I is. That's the remainder, the number of guys who get knocked out of the game and lose their collateral. So, this is the equation that tells you how many guys get knocked out of the game, the mortgage, and have their collateral seized. Now, they tell you inflation's an increase in the money chasing the collateral, when it's actually a decrease in the collateral being chased by the same money. You have 100 chips chasing 10 watches. They tell you inflation is an increase in the money chasing the watches, but I tell you it's a decrease in the watches being chased by the same money. Those two shifts feel the same, but they're caused by something different. So what have I done? Well, first of all, I checked out the Bible. I checked out the good books. I found out that the Buddhist, the Hindu, the Hebrew, the Christian, the Muslim prophets all knock loan sharking, all knock usury, which is interest on money. Interest on cows, Ezekiel said that's okay, just don't take excessive interest. But usury, that's interest on something that doesn't have babies, that creates a death gamble. So if it creates a death gamble, it's usury, the sin. If it doesn't create a death gamble because you can pay a few extra little calves, well, that's reasonable interest. It's different. God may not be mad, but it's always better to give. And finally, both Jesus and Muhammad. Jesus in the Nag Hammadi scrolls recently discovered, Thomas 95, if you have money, do not lend it out at interest. Better you should give it to someone who can't pay you back. So how do these Christian religions feel? Pretty stupid, right? Since Calvin, they've been allowing a little bit of interest and redefining usury to be excessive interest. But Ezekiel said usury or excessive interest, there's a difference. So now Jesus said, don't lend that interest, your money. And that means that all these churches who've lost their way are going to look pretty stupid. So, in the meantime, things I did. Well, I continued in politics, running in every election after that for the next 30 years. I'm now in the Guinness Book of Records for contesting more elections in the world, 68, and losing the most elections in the world, 67, with one tie. And I got into law. I started attacking the banks, asking that the bank's computers be restricted to a pure service charge with the interest charge abolished. That would solve the problem. That's a let's, basically. And then I would also defend poor people being foreclosed on, arguing that We should pay back the principal they printed, but stiff them for the interest they didn't print, just like the model Jesus gave us in the slothful servant, where the slave stiffed his master for the interest but gave him back his principal. We do that too. Then I'd picket and protest, and I'd make a lot of noise around the world. And here's a picture of me in 1982 being arrested at the IMF World Bank Conference with my favorite sign, "Bankers Starve, Third World Babies." And I was passing out a flyer that said to the assembled IMF World Bank, hey, why bring your $1 million bond to a bank to get bills to come back and spend it and tax it out with interest when you can print up $1 million in $1 bonds, spend them, tax them out, no interest. And 2 years later, when Argentina crashed, we have an article that cash-starved Argentinian provinces start printing their own money, and they're paying all their employees with provincial bonds. Well, that's a very valid currency for any government, a piece of bond that you can pay your taxes with. But as soon as things got normal, they got off their economic lifeboat and they got back onto the regular federal currency. But then it crashed again in 2001. So the provinces started issuing their provincial bonds again. By then there were large barter networks ready to go, the UNILETS systems, and they time creditos, and they expanded, and all this interest-free currency in circulation saved them again. They paid off all their IMF World Bank debt 2 years early. No one reported how they did that except me at my videos. So finally, economically, I financed some time bank software called LETS, Local Employment Trading System, a system for trading employment locally. And years later, it spread around the world. And in 2000, I got invited to the Millennium Assembly. And in the Millennium, I got to do the speech on the banking system of the future. And they endorsed Resolution C6 so that we could restructure the global financial architecture with a time-based currency. The name's going to be UNILETS, United Nations International and Local Employment Trading System. So this is a time credit you can spend worldwide. When I went to Europe, I paid for 39 nights out of 40 without cash. I paid with an IOU for a night back in Canada worth 5 hours. That's how the time standard works internationally. So the effects, of course, recently, well, you'll hear about it. Man in the States just blew away his whole family because he lost his job. They just had 60,000 jobs lost today, so there'll be a lot more dead people who are going to be pulling the... So Davos and Belem have the leading thinkers saying they're looking for solutions to the problem. Well, I call on the leading thinkers at Davos and at Belem to endorse the United Nations Millennium Declaration Resolution C6 for a time-based currency, so that a human time is good collateral in the bank, not just a piece of gold. And that brings humanity equal with gold in the eyes of the banks. The time standard of money sets the debt slaves free. Well, I've done my duty as an engineer. I've provided the blueprint. I've supported models. I'm pushing for the worldwide major lifeboat, the life ship to save us all. And I can only hope that the people at Davos and Belem can cooperate to issue a joint resolution for support of the UNILETS resolution at the United Nations, Resolution C6, and a declaration that they're going to set up a UN time-based currency for the whole world right away. Then my job will be done, and the heaven on earth will be engineered, because Jesus said, heaven is, ask for, give us today tomorrow's bread, forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. The day you're not chasing anybody for debts, and no one's chasing you for debts, and you got tomorrow's bread, call that heaven. And as soon as everybody's dealing with one UNILETS bank or one national bank and no one else, call that heaven. So I'm John, the heavens engineer Termel, asking the two fora to do their best to engineer heaven with my blueprint, which comes straight from Jesus' blueprint in Paul Corinthians 2, chapter 8, 14. Your abundance should at the present time be a supply for their want, so their abundance can later be a supply for your want. And in that way, he who gathers much doesn't have too much, and he who gathers little doesn't have too little, that there be equality. So I'm trying to pull off a Nehemiah move here. Nehemiah talked his civilization into giving up loan sharking. I hope I can talk my planet into doing the same thing before there's too many more extra dead people out there.